9 episodes ago, I set out to create a LEGO Minecraft world. It started with a very small and humble desert module, the equivalent of 8x8 blocks in the game. From there, it's grown exponentially, with larger and larger and more detailed models being added to this display. As we come up on episode 10, we're crossing into double digits here. I think it's time to try something even bigger and better. One of the most popular episodes of this series was the Village episode, episode 3, and in it I teased the potential to have a pillager raid by placing some pillagers in the desert. Ever since I released that video, I've been getting quite a few requests to build the Pillager Outpost from you guys, and now seems the perfect time to bring this massive structure to life. And when I say massive, I'm not messing around. This will be the biggest module yet in the series. 6 times larger than that original desert module I constructed way back in episode 1. Without further ado, let's get building. In terms of blocks, we'll need cobblestone, which has been featured in this series before, primarily in the Village episode. We'll also need birch planks, dark oak logs, and dark oak planks. Coming up with parts for a build this size was no easy task. As far as I'm concerned, the only way to do this thing right is to do it at full scale, 100% accurate. That's the way this series kind of goes. I was surprised when laying this thing out for the first time at how big this thing actually is. The whole structure on its own takes up the same amount of space as my entire village module. That's an entire chunk of space dedicated to this one structure. Unfortunately, dark brown, which is one of the main colors in a Pillager Outpost, is not all that common of a LEGO color. I was able to source most of mine directly through LEGO's recently redone Pick-a-Brick service, which helped a lot keeping costs down for this rather expensive build. The bottom layer, while tedious to build, comes together fairly easily. It's just a lot of dark bluish gray plates stacked on top of each other. Basically, all these plates allow me to get in that subtle cobblestone texture achieved by 1x1 round tiles. As we come up on the second floor, I'm going to cheat here a little bit by not using a ton of 2x2 tiles, rather using the side of bricks to create a flat surface. This saves my precious 2x2 tiles, hopefully for a future desert module, as I really want to do a desert village in the near future. The various half slabs and stairs that show up across this structure will be created using a variety of snot, that is studs not on top techniques, as I want this to be 100% accurate. That's kind of my thing. Already, I think this is looking pretty good. It's a solid start to this massive model. I can tell that it's going to be very, very tall. I've got all the key details that I want to capture in this. I'm mixing together both reddish brown and dark brown to create some more contrast within the walls of this structure. Obviously, in the game, the 2 blocks aren't all that different in color, but they do have different textures on them, which is a little harder to achieve at this scale in LEGO. I like having most of the logs primarily be represented in dark brown and the planks with reddish brown, just add some extra contrast. One part I was particularly excited to do was the balcony. Of course, the actual structure in game is surrounded by Pillager Banners, and thankfully LEGO has produced that part and it's been included in 2 sets. I was able to find a Bricklink seller who had something like 16 of these, and I ordered 8, which is the number that you find on your standard Pillager Outpost. I absolutely love the art style that LEGO has developed for their LEGO Minecraft line. It perfectly blends both that typical LEGO aesthetic with the pixelated look of Minecraft and becomes something unique into itself. It's perfect. Attaching the balcony bits is quite satisfying. I have some very interesting parts usage to pull that off, just because the dark brown portfolio is so very limited. I'll make use of another snot-based floor design to avoid using another 100 2x2 tiles, and then it's time to put a roof on this thing. I'm actually going to be doing the roof in dark brown over reddish brown, even though the roof is made up of dark oak planks. My reason for doing that is because it looks better. And this is my build, so I can do whatever I want. Ha! Take that. But seriously, it does just look better. I do have to use that same snot technique I used for the floors because I ran out of 2x2 dark brown tiles. But just like that, the build is done. No, just kidding. We got to make some land for this thing. And as promised, this will be the biggest module yet. It's going to be 2x3 of my standard 8x8 modules compared to my typical 1x2. Yeah, that's a lot bigger. This is going to connect up against the Badlands biome, which of course has a mix of desert in it, but we're going to bleed this into a savanna biome, which is another highly requested biome by you guys. I've held off doing it so long because LEGO does not produce 2x2 tiles in olive green. They produce 2x2 jumpers, but not 2x2 tiles. I'll be substituting 2x4 tiles, but we'll get there in a second. I want to lay out the foundation of this thing so it can be easily removed if need be. And under the outpost, I'm going to add an Easter egg in tribute to Technoblade. Rest in peace, King. The outpost should fit smoothly on top, and like I said, it can be removed when required. Just makes transportation easier, and it's fun just to have an outpost that you can carry around. The thing dominates the landscape, even compared to the very tall Mesa Badlands. And, oh yes, it's that sweet, sweet tiling time. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm using olive green for the Savannah color because it is quite perfectly one of the best grass fits that we have in the LEGO color palette. We'll have a bit of the dark orange of the Mesa and the tan of the desert spread into this as well, so we get some really natural blending of these biomes where they all intersect together. As usual, I'm leaving jumpers dotted around the terrain here too, so we can add additional details later. Flower stems do exist in olive green, technically, but they go for about $1 a piece on Bricklink, so I hope you don't mind if I use regular green, which I have literal thousands of instead. Drop a super thanks if you want to see me replace them with olive green in the future though. Could be kind of fun. There are several structures that can spawn alongside a Pillager Outpost. One of them is the cage, which of course is something I have to include here. This one, super simple construction, very similar to what LEGO did in their version of the Pillager Outpost set. Just, of course, mine uses a lot more pieces because that's what I do. Inside of this cage, I'll be putting the Iron Golem design that I developed just a few days ago, specially for this model. He needs to be just short enough to fit inside the game-accurate cage. LEGO's version of him is just too big. One of the other structures that can spawn alongside an outpost is the training dummy. LEGO did a great version of this in the Pillager Outpost set, and I'm going to replicate that one pretty faithfully. The main body is made up of these 1x2 bricks in yellow with room for a Technic axle in between. You can also put a bar through there, which allows you to attach the arms at that perfect offset. The one thing I feel LEGO's version is missing are the red stripes of the hay bale, which I'll accomplish using red rubber bands, and don't worry, they're official LEGO rubber bands. You know me, I wouldn't cheap out on you like that. But by wrapping these red rubber bands around, I can create a look that's even more faithful than the one I'd be able to achieve with just regular plates. And it adds some additional texture, which I'm always game for. These turned out awesome. All that's left to do really is to populate this thing with my small army of pillagers that I've been hoarding over the last few months, especially for this project. With the addition of these guys, the build really comes to life. This is not something I'd like to mess with if I was in survival. And it's that sweet, sweet time to connect all these things together. I know it's been a while since I last connected everything, so I hope this is as much of a treat for you as it was for me. I told you I had a plan for all these things to come together. It's a plan that's going to take a long time to realize, but we're getting there. Also, I finally got my Arctic fox, which I will swap out with the regular fox. You're welcome. In the last few episodes, we weren't able to connect the mangrove swamp or the mushroom island. And I mean, technically, we still can't until I add a transition module. And this transition module is pretty special because it's, of course, the only part of the build that features an acacia tree. The acacia tree is probably one of the most complex builds on this whole display. It utilizes old gray instead of dark bluish gray for the trunk, which I think is a more faithful color. The color has not been produced since 2003, which makes it a little more difficult to come by. You can see that I had to get pretty creative with the parts usage here because your standard snot bricks were not available back in 2003 and before. For the leaves, I'm using dark green. I just think it adds a great amount of contrast. It's the same thing that LEGO uses in their official kits as well. And of course, it's just easier to use than olive green, which of course suffers from a limited parts portfolio. I'm glad I was able to achieve that all-around smooth look, just like I was with the mangrove swamp tree. This has become one of my favorite trees. Stand by for technical difficulties. Anyway, as you can see, it might be time to get a bigger table because this display is getting out of hand. There's a lot of obvious gaps in this build yet, but I'm looking forward to filling them over the next 10 plus episodes. Don't worry, there's no end in sight for this series quite yet. There's still a lot I want to accomplish. And one of the biggest things I want to accomplish is to add an entire layer of underground modules. And to start that off, I'm going to be doing the Deep Dark for episode 11. Perhaps my most requested module ever. If you want to watch the episode early, all you have to do is hit the join button down below and you will be able to watch episode 11 before anybody else. But that's all for this time. Thank you so much for helping me get this series as far as it has. Thank you as always for your continued suggestions and support. This has been a tremendous joy for me to build. Have a great life. I'll see you later.